it is my turn to share with you now, and I will ask you to, again, take some notes here. I want to talk to you about defining what leadership is, for us. I want to look at the definition of leadership. And I'm going to build off this. I'll build off of this in the following months. We'll be discussing in my sessions, in my segments, we'll be discussing leadership theory and practice. And this is good for just about anyone. This is good for church leaders, business leaders, family leaders, social leaders, any leader in any arena of life can benefit from the information that I'll be sharing with you. Leadership is actually a highly sought after and a highly valued commodity in our world, particularly today. Because of all the advancements of everything we've seen around the world, we are seeing more and more information that is released about leadership, more in this last decade than perhaps at any other time in history. And of course, technology helps us to do that. The public has become interested in the subject of leadership. It has captivated the minds of people now more than ever before. And people continually ask themselves, what do I need to do and to be a better leader? How can I become a better leader in the area that I'm working in? People continue to ask that question, and because they ask that question, they're looking for more information to develop and to effectively grow in the areas of leadership. Have you been to a bookstore anytime lately? Have you seen the section on leadership and seen how many books are on the shelves concerning leadership? Have you done a simple Google search and find out how many online institutes? Have you noticed how many schools have now professional degrees and track programs for leadership? I'm a graduate of one of them, of a master's in arts in religious leadership and administration. And I can tell you that there is I thought I was going to go into the program. And when I got in the program, I walked away with more questions than ever before. The subject of leadership is so broad. The information is so great. I did get a strong grip on many concepts, but I also walked away very humble because I was overwhelmed and in awe with the amount of information and the different types of leadership that exist around the world. So having said that, I want to be able to get to a decent definition of what leadership is. Now, in the past 60 years, there have been more than 65 definitions and classification systems to define what leadership is, to look at different dimensions of leadership. And one such classification suggests that in their view and their perspective of leadership, that leadership is the focus of group processes. Would you write that down? Because and we're gonna develop just our definition over time today. It is the focus of group processes. That is, that person takes the group through a process. That person takes the group through a process. That's one of the ways that leadership is defined. Another way that leadership is defined in those definitions and classifications over the year, one way is that leadership is defined from a personality perspective. A personality perspective. That's a combination of special traits that that person has or characteristics that some individual possesses, and that those things, those traits, those characteristics are what creates and establishes leadership. And there's no absolute definition, I should say that, for leadership. There's really no absolute definition for leadership. We have others who talk about transformational processes and skills perspectives. And they talk about the process of how one takes others through transformation, or what skills are needed to have leadership or to be a leader. So what I want to do is I want to take from those definitions and those components, and I want us to write down a pretty good definition for what leadership is. And despite the fact that there's a multitude of ways in which leadership can be conceptualized, I think that these components are key to understanding leadership. Are you ready? Let me give you these components. I'll give you A, B, C, and D. The first component I want to identify as central to the phenomenon of leadership. Okay, this is just the centerpieces that you have to focus on, is leadership as a process. Leadership as a process. Now, there are entire studies dedicated to understanding what that process looks like, how to move that process along, how to develop that process further. But definitely, in the varying definitions that I've seen and I've read and studied and researched, leadership definitely is a process. That's one of the components for leadership. Here is B. Here is B. And that is that leadership involves influence. Leadership involves influence. There's different ways, again, to growing that influence. There's different ways in which the influence is used, in positive ways, in negative ways. We just had an example of negative influence in the United States on January 6th. Leadership exercising their influence in negative ways. Last night, I read an article that says that there were over 275 people that are now being processed in one way or another legally so that they can be charged for crimes against breaking into the Capitol and the assault and the insurrection that happened on January 6th. And what was interesting to find out is how many of those people are now alleging and claiming through their defense lawyers that what they did because they felt like they were following or being obedient to the words of the commander-in-chief of our nation. Leadership involves influence. Here's C. Leadership occurs in groups. Leadership occurs in groups. That is, it doesn't happen in a vacuum. It doesn't happen by yourself. There's group components here, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a few moments. And then here is D. Leadership involves common goals. Now, feel free to share in the chats your points and perspectives and things that you're taking away or anything you feel of value so that other people can take note of that as well. Leadership involves common goals. So based on these components, let's put together a definition of leadership today. And the components again is that leadership is a process. Leadership involves influence. Leadership occurs in groups. And leadership involves common goals. We're all sharing this goal in common. So here's a definition we'll put together for today. Are you ready? Let's go at this together. Leadership is a process. Leadership is a process whereby an individual influences a group of individuals to achieve a common goal. I'll say it 2 more times, all right? Leadership is a process whereby an individual influences a group of individuals to achieve a common goal. Break it down one more time, Bishop. Slow it down. Here we go. Leadership is a process whereby an individual influences a group of individuals to achieve a common goal. To achieve a common goal. That's the definition that we're working on today to understand leadership. Defining leadership as a process. Let's look at that definition now. Defining leadership as a process means that in all actuality, leadership isn't so much a trait or a characteristic that resides in the leader, I remember years ago, there was a lot of information, and there still is to this day, about developing these leadership traits and these leadership characteristics. Can I tell you something? For many years, I was looking to sharpen this part of me up and sharpen that part of me up. And there's nothing wrong with that, because we all should grow and we should develop. And there's plenty of things that we need to sharpen. So I continue to sharpen. However, years ago, I was sharpening those areas up so that I can see the impact of my leadership on other people, until I realized that in all reality, leadership is a process, and that process means that it doesn't just, those characteristics that need to be sharpened don't just reside in the leader, don't just reside in me. So it's important to focus on me, but I'm not the only one that I need to be focusing on. Rather, and we'll continue to say this here, because it's a process rather than just being traits and characteristics that reside in a leader. Leadership is a transactional event that occurs between leaders and followers. I'm not a leader by myself. There are followers. There's people that I'm working with. And so there are transactional events that are occurring. So yes, I want to sharpen my traits and characteristics. However, they don't solely depend on that. I sharpen myself up for the events of transactions with others, but I need to pay attention to others as well, right? Process implies that a leader affects and is affected by followers. Pay attention to that. Process implies that a leader what? Affects and is affected by the followers. Because I'm not doing this by myself, not only do I need to pay attention to the areas I got to develop, I got to pay attention to the people that I'm leading, because they have an effect on how I grow as a leader. They have an effect on where I go as a leader, on how I think. I'm listening to the people around me. I've got to be open to the people around me. And boy, we can say a whole lot about that, because if the leader's personality and character is too high-minded, is too stuck on themselves, then they won't even open themselves up to the critique or the conversations or the thoughts that other people share with them, right? But leaders who understand leadership as a process also understand that they are not just affecting people, they're also affected by people. It emphasizes, really, this principle of process emphasizes that leadership's not linear. Leadership is not linear. It's not a one-way event, but it's an interactive event. It's not a one-way thing, it's a two-way street. It's happening in a process. When leadership's defined in that manner, then it becomes available to everyone. Leadership becomes available to everyone. It's not restricted simply to the designated leader in a group. Now leadership is shared. Leadership becomes a group effort. People participate in the process together with their leader. And I don't know about you, but I appreciate that so much more than not having a voice as a follower, than not having 2 cents to put into a process, right? I appreciate so much more the ability to have a leader who can hear and who can be affected by me as much as I am affected by them. Sounds good to you? Let's move on with our definition here. We said leadership is a process whereby an individual influences a group of individuals to achieve a common goal. So leadership, you need to write this down. Leadership involves influence, we said. It involves influence. Its concern, when we talk about influence, its concern is not just one way, it's a two-way. So it's concerned with how the leader affects followers and is affected, but its focus is more on the leader affecting the followers, because I'm trying to use my influence on the whole group. Yes, the group has an influence to a degree, to an impact on me, but leadership together, them with my leadership, should produce influence for everyone. It should produce influence for everyone. It should affect how followers are following. It should affect how people are thinking and how behavior is changed in the process, right? So without influence, here's the biggest thing: without influence, leadership doesn't exist. That's a huge statement. Without influence, leadership does not exist. So the question then becomes, well, how do I increase my influence? Well, we'll talk about that later on in other times to develop our leadership. But for now, let it suffice to say that without it, your leadership doesn't even exist. I mean, I've got to look at ways to how can I increase my footprint on social media so that I can influence more? How can I increase my footprint on people's minds, right? My impact is what I'm saying by footprint. How can I influence my how can I influence my presence to be more constant, or the purpose that we're trying to accomplish, the goal we're trying to get met? How can I keep that in front of people's mind? How can I keep it in their eyes? Because once it's out of sight, it's out of mind. So there's different questions I need to ask to develop and increase my influence. Write this one down. It is leadership is a process whereby an individual's influence, an individual influences a group of individuals to achieve a common goal. Write this down. We said it, but I want to isolate it. Leadership occurs in groups. Leadership occurs in groups. You say, "Oh, I'm a leader to myself." No, that just means you're by yourself. That's just you being you. When we talk about leadership, it has to occur in groups, right? Groups are the context in which leadership takes place. Leadership involves influencing a group of individuals who have, watch this, a common purpose. It's a group of individuals who share and have a common purpose. And we could be talking about a small group task. We could be talking about a group in your community, a large group in an entire organization. In the case of last week's example, it could be a national platform. Okay, it could be regional. Whatever the group size is, leadership happens within the context of group. It's about one individual influencing the group. You say, well, you said that already, Bishop. That's basic. Everybody should know that. Yeah, but what I need you to understand is that it's not just that we're happening within the group has a common goal. Everyone is in on the same goal. We're all trying to do the same thing. Now stop right there for a moment. This is going to help somebody in here today. Some of the people you think you may be a leader of don't share your goals. Therefore, your influence is not going to work. Have you as a leader ever run into a frustration because you can't get the group where you want them to be? Either you need to develop your influence more, or that those individuals in the group do not share the common goals. I said to Elder Troy not long ago that concerning some of the goals I have and how I want to see other people's participation, it makes me think, are they even members of my church? Am I even their pastor? Because I don't see them sharing the same goal I have. And the way I know they're not sharing the same goal is because they're not where I am. I wasn't going to make this a sermon, but Jesus said, I know you're my disciple if you are where I am. The leader knows who follows because he can look over his shoulder or her shoulder and see the people right there, right? When you share the same goal, then you can be counted in the group. Don't get confused that because people signed up and registered, because people are present in the group, make them a part of the group. What makes you a part of the group, the dynamic is shared goals. And that we're going to be influenced by, as well as influence for leadership within that group. All right, I'm glad you're enjoying this. I can see your comments. Easy, Bishop. Watch it. I hear you, babe. That's the truth. Okay. So a group, well, let me just say this: leadership training programs that teach people to lead themselves really are not considered in the definition that we're giving to be a part of leadership, because we're talking about a group dynamic and people with shared goals. Write this next one down. I'm winding it down and I'm going to open up for Q&A. Leadership, as I said already, includes attention to common goals. Write that down. Attention to common goals. And I'm going to go at it now from a little bit of a different perspective. Leaders direct their energies towards individuals who are trying to achieve something together. If you want to grow in your leadership, stop casting your pearls before the swine. Give it to a worthy audience. Give your attention, your energies to people who share the same goal as you and accept and receive you as a leader. Okay? And by common, when I say common goals, we mean that the leaders and the followers together have a mutual purpose. The other thing that's really important about these common goals, and I think a lot of leaders miss out on this, and because of it, a lot of abuses exist, is that attention to common goals give leadership an ethical overtone. When you put your attention on common goals, the leader is able to have an ethical overtone, because it stresses the need for the leader to work with followers to achieve selected goals. Let me explain what I'm trying to say here. When you have common goals as a leadership, it helps you to stay and have ethical overtones, because I now, sharing a common goal with the follower, with you, am going to work together with you to help us get there and lead us there to the goal that you and I agreed that we share in common, versus the unethical practice of using my influence to get you to do what I want. That's not leadership. That's manipulation. That's control. That's control. There's interesting that the word leader, when you look at it from the Latin, means to take by the hand and lead. I'm going to take you by the hand and I'm going to lead you. I'm going to walk you into something. Where control talks about twisting the arm and forcing it and urging the person in. There's an act of will and acting against another person's will. And I think too many leaders are trying to build something for themselves, trying to build their brand, trying to get to their personal vision, trying to get to their personal attainment, and not the shared common goal. There's not a mutual purpose that a lot of people are working for that call themselves leaders. And so what happens is that people get caught up in the flair of their personality. They get caught up in their giftings. They get caught up in all the wonder of what they're saying, but they don't realize that this person, this leader, does not truly have an interest in the followers, let alone an interest in a shared common goal, and that they continue to use their influence to get what they want and to subject people to those things. So the reason having a common goal is important is because it helps you to identify who in fact is a follower and who in fact is a leader, because we're both working towards the same thing, versus one of us is not working towards that. Right? When you realize that one of us is not working towards that, then clearly one is not a follower or one is not a leader, because we're not working towards the achieved selected goals. So there's a stress here. Would you write this down? There's a stress on mutuality. There's a stress on a mutual agreement towards attaining a specific goal. That's how I know you're truly my leader. And that's how you know I'm truly your follower, in that we share. There's a mutuality towards a goal and we're not being forced or we're not being unethical in this process and in this principle. Isn't that wonderful? So when you engage in leadership, if you haven't noticed already, we're talking about leaders and followers, right? When you engage in this, there is a mutuality that is shared. Um, Leaders have, write this down too, leaders have an ethical responsibility, moral responsibility to attend to the needs and the concerns of followers. Now, don't get this mixed up with pastoral ministry. The shepherd cares for their sheep. Their ethical, moral responsibility is for the well-being of the sheep. I'm not just speaking pastorally. I'm talking about leadership here, outside of pastoral ministry. In leadership, I'm concerned for the need and the follower as it relates to meeting the mutual goal. All right. Another mistake a lot of us make that are involved in ministry is we try to shepherd and pastor everyone we lead. And some things are outside of pastoral ministry. They need to get done on leadership basis, which is if that person does not share the mutual goal, then I can't lead you. So that limits the interaction, right? Where pastoral ministry goes beyond that. So in leadership, I'm talking about within leadership, I'm not asking you to be everybody's pastor if you're not the pastor. Indeed, if you're not called to be a pastor, if this is not the flock that you're pastoring in, then, and I want you to be a leader, then what I'm saying is make sure that they're on board with the common goal. Make sure you are on board with the common goal and respond to the needs and the concerns as they relate to the common goal to help the follower accomplish it and achieve it. Okay, that's what I'm talking about when we say this. Here's something that you need to write down. This is just a bonus because now that I'm talking about leaders and followers, leaders are not above or better than the followers. Leaders are not above or better than the followers. Oh, but that's my mentor. That's my leader. You know that the word mentor, if you look at it in the Latin, it's not to walk in front of, it's to walk beside. If I walk in front of you, I don't pay attention to your pace. If I walk behind you, I push you at my pace. But if I walk beside you, I walk with you at your pace. Isn't that awesome? So I'm not forgetting you and leaving you behind. I'm not pushing you into something you don't want. I'm standing alongside you and paying attention to the pace that you can go at. Leaders are not above followers. They're not better than their followers. Leaders and followers need to understand each other in relationship to a collective goal and work together responsibly and in a responsive way. Not just a responsible way, but in a responsive way. I'm going to respond to what you can put towards this goal, and I'll meet you there so that we can get to that goal together, right? People will respond differently because they're in different places of life. Someone can put in an hour, someone can put in 10 hours. Someone can put in 20% of what they have, another can put in 60% of what they have. I'm going to respond to you where you are, and I'm going to help us with whatever it is you're doing to help us to get to the common goal. I'm going to bring this to a close now. In addition to the definitions and the issues, in addition to the definitional issues that we have, it's also important to discuss several other questions pertaining to the nature of leadership. And would you write these down? Because we'll get these things we'll get to them later, but I want you to just to start thinking about them right now. Think about things like how leadership as a trait differs from the leadership process. Right? If your approach to leadership was it's a trait that I have, then you're not paying attention to that process so much because you're focused on your traits and your characteristics and your abilities and all the growing that you've been doing for yourself. How does leadership as a trait differ from the process? Here's another question. Ask about how appointed leadership differs from emergent leadership. How does appointed leadership differ from emergent leadership? What are you saying? Some people are appointed to a leadership place, other people emerge to that place. There's a different drive, there's different skill sets, there's different interests, okay? And there's a different way they approach things if you're appointed versus emergent. And then, and let me just say these, how the concept of power, something we need to think about, how the concept of power, coercion, and management differ from leadership. How do these concepts differ from leadership? Power, coercion, and management. Do they share something with leadership? And then more importantly, perhaps, is how do they differ? Power, coercion, and management. Those are some of the things I want you to think about as we move forward, and then we'll develop over the next few months. Right now, I wanted to open it up to you. I want to take the next several minutes and answer questions if you have any, or try to answer questions, and hear any comments that you might want to share. So go right ahead, tell me your name, where you're from, and then go ahead and give me your comment or question.
Good morning, Bishop. My name is Alette Brown. I'm from Brooklyn, New York. Can
Hey,
you talk
let
a little bit more? You know who I am, Bishop,
I
but
know who you are.
everybody else doesn't.
This is my classmate. This is my class buddy. We work projects together to get through that degree program. Come on, Alette.
Oh, only by the Spirit of the Lord. But can you talk a little bit more about emergent leadership and what
Sure.
that means and how that looks?
Sure. Thanks for the question, Let. Emergent leadership really is this concept of people who are thriving because they have certain traits and characteristics, perhaps a calling into leadership. They've put interest, they've developed, and they are just zooming right on in, kind of like kicking the door down, coming into leadership, versus someone who's appointed. And let me just say this. Have you ever seen someone given a job they didn't want to have? Right? Have you ever seen someone put in a position because it was they needed to fill a position in the company, so they put this person in because they've been so long and they have certain traits, and that person may or may not have an interest in the area, right? And so there's that, and so much more to be said. But when we talk about emergent leaders, well, Alette, you are an emergent leader, because there's something that's on the inside of you, and it has driven you to produce the things you're doing in ministry and in life, right? Versus the appointed ones. And let me just say that when we talk about it in terms of ministry, some people are realizing, some emergent leaders are realizing that they don't have the right mentors around them to appoint them into a place of leadership. Okay. Some of us know where we need to be, but other people are not affording us the opportunities. And so the question is, how do we emerge with our leadership when the appointments are not available? Right. So there's differences there as well. Thanks for that question. I hope I provided a good answer, or somewhat of one. All right, good. Anyone else?
Yes, Bishop, this is Dark Collins in Orlando. Thank you so much for the teaching today. Could you just talk, and we may go into this further into the coming months, but if you could just talk a little bit about uh, reluctant leadership, those who find themselves in a position of leadership and they're reluctant, not necessarily they'd rather be followers, but God has just somehow put them in a position of leadership, and now they have to figure out how to do it. Can you just speak to that a bit?
Yes, I absolutely can. When I hear that, and thanks for that question and that comment, Pastor Charlitha. When I think about reluctant leadership, it always draws me to the Bible story of Gideon, one whom God was calling and had a whole lot of reasons why he shouldn't be there. And I think that reluctance in leadership is a reflection of a lot of unfinished process in emergent leaders. The difference between the emergent leader and a reluctant leader, would be that the emergent leader seems more somewhat confident or has gone through a process of answering areas of insecurities, questions, things that trouble them from within that make them feel like this is not my time, or I'm not ready for this, or I'm not sure about moving forward, things that make them reluctant in leadership. A lot of what happens in reluctance, and you need to be really, and we're saying reluctant leadership because, and it's an oxymoron because we said leadership is influence, but here's someone who doesn't want to use influence. However, they have it. They have the influence, right? So reluctance leadership is not responding to the leadership that's within. The person already has influence. The person already has preparation in the most cases, but don't know it or don't want it. Okay. And so there's either an issue of recognizing what is there that other people recognize and they don't recognize themselves, or I do recognize that, yeah, I have those things, but there are other matters in my life that make me reluctant to respond to them. So reluctance in leadership has everything to do with not responding to the process, not responding to the influence, or not responding to the group. And sometimes it has to do with not responding to themselves and what is on the inside of them. So that reluctant leader needs to work some things out yet. All right. We got time for maybe another two.
Bishop, I have a question, and
Okay.
I'm going to give it to you. I was trying to get it in with Bishop Johnson, but since here we're actually on leadership, he had mentioned about being resilient, and that the group or the church needs to be led through change by a resilient leader who practices and demonstrates the value of learning, listening, looking, and lamenting. And the question I kind of wanted to address or ask about: what do you say to a leader who may not be able to be bouncing back so well, that their resilience, their ability to be resilient has been worn down over circumstances and trials or whatever the case may be? So now that leader is leading, but does not have, the resilience is just not there. How do you speak to that type of leader to help them possibly get back on track, or to get the relief or the help that they would need, because they do have to lead the people into being being resilient?
Well, you asked an excellent question, overseer, and in your answer towards the end, in your question you gave the answer towards the end. You say, how do you get them until they get relief or help? That's what I say to a leader who is experiencing a loss of resilience. First of all, get relief. Take time to rest. Take time to heal. Take time to pray. Take time to meet with a counselor or a therapist. Take time to share with your mentor so that things can be put back into you that have just waned or just disappeared, right? Or have been eroded by the issues that we're experiencing. It's so important for there to be self-care, for there to be a good measure of rest. One of the things that Jesus did, which is the world's greatest leader ever, one of the things that Jesus did often was to get by himself, to get alone. The more I grow in leadership, the more I grow in responsibilities, I find myself in part being more of a loner, and not in a negative way, but someone who is seeking more time to be alone. One of the things that, as a pastor, I recommended that our church do this year was we opened small groups to go through crafting a rule of life, and we're looking at the Benedictine practice of the rule of Benedict, how to develop time where you can balance your time out and balance yourself out. One of the keys to that is having alone time every day, having a time of refreshing. So first thing is relief. Find relief. Where is the pain? Where is the lack of energy coming from? Where is the loss coming from? Identify that and then find the relief for it. And there's different ways you can do that. The alone time, the counseling, the therapist, the prayer, a vacation, different things of that nature. And that has to be a regular rhythm. You cannot wait to hit a ceiling to find relief. There has to be a regular rhythm of life, just like we need sleep every day. We have to have time while we're awake where we can rest. Okay, there has to be awake time where I can find rest for my soul and rest for myself. Second thing I would say is what you just said. What do we say to them to find relief and to get help in the meantime? Number two is find help. For instance, let me say this to you. One of the reasons I started taking time as a pastor and spending it with leaders, and I used to do it weekly, classes every week. Then I would do special things every month. And then throughout the year, I would do special things because I found out that investing in people who really want to develop their leadership, I was actually not only helping them, I was helping me and helping the overall organization because I wasn't putting everything on one person's shoulders. We were able to share responsibilities, right? And so I taught a whole course on delegation, who to delegate to, why delegation fails, when's the right time to delegate, who not to delegate to. And the reason I did that was because I found out that finding help is critical to accomplishing goals. One of God's names in the Bible is help. God, our helper, right? And so help is key, help is critical. And I've run into leaders who say, I don't have help. I have no one around me interested in helping me. To that leader, I would say, stop investing in people who are unwilling to help. To that leader, I say, step off, reassess your assignment. Because if you're in a group leading and no one wants to help, and if you're certain that no one wants to help, either you're not reading the group right, or if you're right and no one wants to help, you're leading the wrong group. You need to exit that group. Okay? Because leadership happens within a group, and the group has shared goals. And when there's shared goals, there is a willingness to walk alongside and to help a process. And so as long as there's people in the group willing to achieve the goal, there's always help present. It's more of identifying that help and learning I can give this piece to that one, this piece to that one. I'm used to doing 5 things, but that would overwhelm one. Maybe I need to find 5 people, each can do one. And then we can get the help done that way, right? So it's finding that relief, and finding the help is the only way for a leader who's lost resilience to regain their resilience leadership. Excellent question. I hope I provided a good answer for you. Okay. Well, everyone, our time is past. We're 2 minutes over time because I got excited with that question and started answering. I want to thank you again for joining us today for the Virtual Leadership Summit. If you've not already done so, don't forget to be generous if you're able to. This was a complimentary session, but be generous by sending a Cash App gift to $David Maldonado, DMM. We will be back on the 3rd Saturday of February, February 20th, with our very special guest, Dr. Alfred Johnson. I'm looking forward to our time in the coming month. If you want to be a part of that, make sure to register. This has just been phenomenal. Thank you to Bishop Joey Johnson, to Overseer Myra Jackson, to Overseer Brandon McCrae, to Bishop Cordell Ball Samuel, and to all of you, God bless you. Thank you. Happy New Year. Let's grow together in our leadership, and let's get higher, as high as we can, on our next Virtual Leadership Summit. I hope to see you there. God bless you. Pay attention to your emails. We'll be sending you more information along the way. God bless you. Have a great afternoon.